Wayne, I like your haircut.
Thanks.
It literally looks very slick.
Yeah, so at this point, it has made it back to slick. there, there's a period between this and when you've shaved that it's extremely grippy.
This is true.
It was one of the most astounding things to me when I shaved my head the first time is wearing a hat within like the first couple of days afterwards is incredibly bizarre, especially if it's like a knit cap, because when you pull it off, it's just like yeah, it's intensely uncomfortable.
Yes, like Velcro.
Yeah.
Or Velcro's the brand name. What is it? Hook and Loop?
Hook and loop fasteners.
Yeah, Hook and Loop. Which I hear that and think, what?
Yes.
Velcro.
Oh, Wayne, I'll be honest, I hope I never experienced that.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Well, it looks like we've got quite a few people on. Should we go ahead and get started? I haven't actually checked this morning, but yesterday I did not have any feedback on the retrospective, so we can do a retrospective that's about the last few releases. But if nobody has any feedback, that'll be a really short retro, and well, we'll go from there. So we may have just a few things to cover there, and we can open it up to discussion. So welcome everybody to the open hour. Here's our agenda, some general stuff, and we'll just roll right through this. So we did have a release yesterday. Yay! And I think there's been a few questions, been trying to answer those. We did see some success there in going back to the memory leak not being quite so bad, but we will see a major fix for that in the next major release that is aluminum. And that's coming right up. We're targeting mid-February for that right now. If that date changes, we will of course communicate that out. Don't anticipate that at this moment. The Zoom meeting IDs will be changing. This will start at the 1st of December. You will see some of these change over, and they will be on the calendar. And the calendar will be moving to an Office 365, and that will also happen on the 1st of December. Janae and I are working pretty closely on that, and we will make sure that's communicated well in advance, and maybe even have some overlap on the calendar so that you could see it in both places for a month. Today we have a docs clinic. This is just information on that. It's every Thursday. They're a working group or a clinic. It's at 2 p.m. Mountain and 8 p.m. UTC. We do usually live stream that, although I'm having trouble making that work right now. I don't know what's happening on our side here, but I may need to look into that further. It may be that we need to do one or the other, and that is possible, although I liked how we had it set up, so I will be continuing to look into that to see if I can get that corrected. So here are a current list of the SALT enhancement proposals and the link to this. We are also looking to open a few more and start running with some of these as well. And we'll be, Janae and I will be working on that together, and then Janae will take the helm there, and that's going to move very quickly, I believe. Some of these are gaining in, what do I want to say? They're really being talked about a lot. And so some of these I think are going to move forward very quickly. Like the community advisory board, I think is just waiting to jump off the diving board and take off on its own. And so we just need to get moving on that. We've had just a few other things going on, so we'll continue to move forward as quickly as we can on those. We were also talking about one today regarding the module.run. And I think that's also a really great one to do a SEP in once we make some decisions there. There's a lot going on in the ticket that is to make a decision on what direction we'll go. So we'll probably move that into a SEP and have that discussion there synchronously and asynchronously here. Also thinking about making a meeting. I don't know if this one needs to be weekly. Maybe it's every other week or monthly, where we could dive into these and talk about them. Maybe even with once the community advisory board is set up. So looking to make that a little more formal and make sure that we're doing what we need to there. Any questions?
Questions, expressions of excitement, like all are accepted.
Woohoo!
I just want to say that I'm excited to see that we're still on track to get aluminum out in a reasonable time frame, and that's been a really fantastic shift for us overall, and getting closer and closer to having more reliable ongoing releases. So just want to give a huge thanks to everybody who's made so much progress making that happen.
Woohoo! Celebrate! Go team!
Go team.
Yeah, I think that's been it's been good to have something that we can rely on there. And I'm interested to hear from other people if they feel the same way.
24 has been done.
I think it just needs the it needs to be ran through the process in the PR. Like we need to say, hey, this isn't its final comment period. And then I think that has a certain amount of time that has to run through. Is it 10 business days?
It's just 1 week.
Just 1 week, so 5 business days or something. Yeah. And so I think it just
Unless
needs,
it's super exciting and there's tons and tons of,
yeah,
on it, but
yeah, I think it just needs that last little piece of sort of the process to say, hey, this is in the final comment, approve and finish it off.
Right.
I think there's actually a couple like that.
What Tyler is saying is it's already been implemented and is in the code. So
Yes.
Yes, I understand that. I
What
think
do you want
the reason that it's on this list is because the PR hasn't been merged. That's actually the SEP. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it just needs to go through that piece, whatever that is. Like if we just need to say, we already did the final comment, it was here, we just need to merge this. That's fine.
merge it.
I think that's fine.
I'm a fan of merging. I should have a quick comment on SEP 28. We do have the official statement and lists around around that verbiage from VMware. We're going to be using that as the standard. I'm going to, I'll see if I can get a link, either a link or a copy. I think that might be an internal page. But Mike might be able to come back and get a link to what all of VMware's expectations are along inclusive language. With that said, the change of Saltmaster to what will probably be something like Salt Controller is going to be incredibly invasive. So just as long as we continue to set expectations that we're all on board, but this is going to be a serious pain in the neck. Okay, thanks.
Very much so. Yeah, and I think
we
that
had both scripts for a while and show a big fat warning when we use Saltmaster and not Self-Controller.
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we're definitely going to need to maintain a Saltmaster script for a long time.
Yeah, sometime.
Yeah, a long time. But we will be able to change documentation, et cetera, over to use a new thing. Yeah, and have warnings, et cetera, for deprecation.
Yep.
There's reasons why a system called NIS, which isn't widely used anymore, but NIS changed its name, or used to be called Yellow Pages. And so it's this piece of software that's used for centralized authentication management via PAM. It was developed in the 80s, and it was called Yellow Pages. And in the 90s, they had to change their name to something else. because, you know, the company Yellow Pages said, no, Sun Microsystems, you can't make something called Yellow Pages. The command to run that system is still YP. So these things can be hard to change. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, yes. And I think that starting it and even having the SEP is good. And we probably just need to comment in the longevity that we expect for this to take and to consume and to live, because I think that that's important. But I also think that it sets the expectation that we know that this is a thing. We know that we want to change it, but we also don't expect this to happen quickly. Please don't expect us to change quickly either. We will have things that we need to keep in place in order to just keep things running.
Yeah, just as long as we're able to keep expectations. And at the same time, we will be able to completely present to the world and through documentation and all of these things, a complete change in verbiage. But it will take a lot more time for us to fully remove the term master from the code base.
Yes, and if our closed captioning can get that right, it's not verbiage, it's verbiage. Okay, thank you. That's close enough.
Are we gonna need to change our branch name, I assume?
I assume that we
Master
would
branch
need to
or something.
change master branch. That's, I believe that's in the SEP, although if it's not, it will probably come up in the comments.
We could call it develop.
Well, we could.
I'm a fan of Excelsior.
I'm a fan of
Perhaps we
blue, but I don't think we can.
Perhaps we should open these up to the community at large. That always goes well.
We should ask, should it be changed to Kirk or Picard?
I was gonna say like maybe like Branchy McBranchface.
I like Branchy McBranchface.
I like that too.
Big red branch face is what closed captioning got. So Branchy Mick branch face.
Mercedes, do you get that joke?
I do. Yeah,
I
somebody-
apologize for completely derailing the meeting.
No, you're fine. All
I
fun. and
expect
games.
nothing less.
That's fair.
No, any other comments, questions, concerns, anything on any of these SEPs or some of the ones that we've been talking about as well?
I'm curious like how everyone thinks the set process is working, like if it's working, if everyone's happy with it, if there's any way we can improve it going forward.
Well, I hope they're not too happy with it because it's going to shift and improve. So,
Well,
it's okay to be
I think the
happy.
process can always be improved, even if we're happy with pieces of it. So that's still okay. I think there's always room for improvement, and there's some things that we could do there to make that more, I think visible and transparent are the words that I'm looking for, but to also keep to a timely schedule. Some of these need more time and some of them don't. And we've left that a little bit vague so that we could do that with each one. But I think we may need to tighten that up a little bit just so that we know exactly how to move things through this process quickly and efficiently as such. When it needs more time, we can also say that. But there's times I think that we don't know how to push it forward.
No, that's
So
fair.
on a more specific issue with SEP 26, I might have missed this, but is there any update on what's happening with that? Because like the last comments on that were 24 days ago, and it's had fee approvals. But what are the next stages of that?
Bryce, are you any closer to this one? Who's closest to this one right now?
I'm pretty sure it's Bryce, but I know the last I saw there was some feedback that needed to be incorporated into the SEP, and there was some discussion and some kind of larger questions, and I don't know if those have actually been answered yet, but
that's step 26.
The packaging salt with Tiamat, and I believe that Pedro actually answered quite a few of those, but that we do need to go back and do some of the administrative work to clean up the PR that reflects everything in the comments and thus move it forward. So there's a lot of administrative work that needs to happen with those that it doesn't always happen smoothly and quickly, or we don't always know who's exactly assigned to that. And I think with Janae coming on as the community manager, that's going to just really shape up. And she's just going to do a fantastic job there, and we'll put some more visibility around how that process, those pieces actually happen and who does them and when. And that's the piece that I'm talking about that needs a little bit more process definition around it, that I think that we will bring to it as we just move forward.
Yeah, by the new year, we'll be able to nail these questions and have a just really clean process for you. So we're not going, oh, who owns that? Who's close to that? It'll be we'll have this cleaned up by the end of 2020.
Okay. Did we ever get it fixed, being able to install pip packages like libvirt, where it requires running Python and it thinks that the run script is Python?
Can you
I thought
repeat?
Joe was working on that. Did we ever fix the issue where you try to pip install something and it thinks that the run script is Python, and so you can't install things like Python libvirt?
We should have fixed all of that. I should have fixed all of that.
I thought that you did as well, Pedro. Yeah.
If
Okay,
that's still not
cool.
working, or you're seeing it fails in a particular package, let me know which, so I can dive in and see why
I just
that
hadn't
package
looked at it in a
doesn't.
while,
Okay.
so I was curious.
Yeah,
the status.
the status of pip with Tiamat is that we can install a Python package that needs to link to the Python runtime, and we can also install a Python package that needs to link to a system binary, a system library. So we can link either to Python directly, which is the one that we ship, or to an external library on the system. That's supported. So if it's failing somewhere, then we need to see where and why, but it should work.
Just a question on Tiamat. Is the repo that's on GitLab for Tiamat, is that actually the latest Tiamat, or is there an internal version that's newer, or what's the sort of status of that? Just because it's about a month ago, I think, since the last update on that. And I just wondered if that is the current sort of latest version.
Yeah, well, that is the authoritative Git repo.
Okay.
Yeah, we made a bunch of additions and changes there. Now, some of the things with respect to packaging salt in Tiamat are in another repo called salt package. So Tiamat should be up to snuff feature-wise, but a lot of the work along exactly what we're focused on here is along the lines of adding packaging components into salt, just to make that whole transition really, really smooth.
And are those on GitLab?
And that is in GitLab as well, the GitLab
okay.
pack repo.
But yes,
I'd like to make sure you've got that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And also regarding SEP 26, there's a poll in the SEP right now, which is what's the expected behavior of salt? And the question is, should pip install a Python package into the system, or should pip install a package into the salt environment? Since salt is used to prepare and configure a system, that's one of the things that it does. The usual answer, or the common answer, could probably be install a package into the system. But actually, the last time I checked the poll, extending the salt Python environment is winning. So if you can please cast your vote. We actually only have 9, and I'm pretty sure there's more than 9 people using pip install. Just so that we don't make a decision that then goes contrary to what people expect, users expect.
Yeah, Pedro, I'll make sure that that gets in the notes to get more votes on that and put that link out there. I don't have it handy unless you do and you want to put it in the chat.
It's probably also worthwhile sending that to like the SALT users email list. That would be a good place to get that in front of people.
I'll do that as well today or this week with the notes. Great suggestion. Anything else about SEPs? SEP. My closed captioning doesn't work like I want it to. Too bad.
SEP would be spelling.
There we go.
September.
SEP.
All right, so what's next?
So next I have on the agenda is the retrospective, and if anybody has anything, I would love to hear from you. Anything that's going well, anything that isn't going well that we could do better, how we can improve.
It's okay. You can say that we've already achieved perfection. It's okay.
I was going to say, it sounds like we're awesome and we're doing everything right. So
Yeah, okay, so what's on the
Yeah,
next?
you are.
No, sometimes with the retrospective, I don't get a lot of feedback. And that's actually, as a Scrum Master, that's scary to me. That actually says that people are not willing to speak up about something that is going well or isn't going well. But we want to hear from you, because a retrospective is also supposed to be, this is something that we should look at in ourselves. How can we improve ourselves? It's not a blame game. It's not a shame game. It is something where we say, hey, this didn't go well. What are we going to do about it? How can we improve ourselves? How can we make this better for us? And that's the approach that I want to take here.
Let me see if I'm interpreting you correctly, Sage. Pedro absolutely failed at many things. So blame game. No, from a retrospective, Pedro's fantastic, by the way, that was a joke. From the retrospective perspective, the things that I will say is that we were a little too shell-shocked with the other CVE, and despite the fact that the Salt API CVE was critical in its own scope, or the vulnerability which was exposed over the Salt API, to be more precise, was critical in its own scope. I think that we probably could have presented it in a cleaner way, that we do not expect it to have anywhere near the same global level of impact that the CVE earlier this year had. The vast majority of vulnerabilities, and by vast majority, I mean all but 2 in the history of the project, have not been really big deals for people. And so it's worthwhile that even if we're expecting to get a severe score and we do deem it critical, just because it's critical doesn't necessarily mean that the circumstances in which it's going to be presented are going to expose significant liabilities. And that we need to figure out better ways to communicate that so that we get less initial panic. While at the same time not lowering the stance of course, issuing the importance and criticality of issues that we have. So we just continue to move forward and try and find better balance there. That's all.
I think
this
that's a
is
great one
my
to
level.
point out. Thank you, Tom. Yes, Curl, release stability is an issue. Can we hope for a 0.0 release that will work? Smiley face. Maybe it's worth waiting for 1 to 2 weeks. So on the call earlier, we were talking about hitting release dates. And if we do hit release dates, this does become an issue. So we used to be a little more on this other side of it, where we were looking for stability, but not really hitting dates. And then we went, I think it was 1.5 years without a stable release for a major release sometime. And we needed to pull back on that. And I think we do need to look at what we're doing there for an RC, so a release candidate. If we could really get release candidates tested and give a full process to that and time to that, that's one thing that I think that we can improve on, and to make that, to hope for the point release or a major release to really be more stable. But I'm open to other ideas, of course.
I was just going to bring up that same idea, or the fact that the release candidates, that I don't know what the answer is, but I know what the question is. And the question is, how do we get people more invested in testing release candidates in their own infrastructure and reporting issues back to us, so that we can either halt the train or fix the bugs in that release candidate window?
Right, and something else we had ideated on was maybe even a lab environment, or if we could get use cases to test in a lab environment, or in our own environments here, to test that, as we understand that some people don't have the ability to test a release candidate in their own infrastructure, and that's a viable reason. But we would still like to have that. So we're trying to look for other ways to do that. So if we could understand some really good use cases and put them into something else, or have lab environments available for people to test in, bug bounties, some other things there, we're open to those, and would love to look into making those happen. Other ideas.
Would it help any to have 2 rounds of RCs instead of just 1, like we typically do?
Could do. We've had a problem definitely with 1 even being, so it's hard to say that another one would fare better.
Well,
You know what I'm saying? But I think I know what you're talking about.
definitely not doing well as far as getting the RCs and having enough time for people to test. Like, we typically have been missing our RC date by at least a week, if not 2.
Yes, that's true. And so I think that we could tighten that up.
Do you have any either stats or even just sort of intuition about how many people are actually downloading the RCs and trying them?
Currently, we don't have that type of telemetry in place to really say. That may change as we've moved over to VMware and can understand that in a different way. But currently, I don't know that we have a way to know that.
Bryce, is that something that would be easy to solve?
Yeah, we can look that up. We have the same stats as we do for the regular downloads on those. So we just have to look it up.
Cool. Yeah, cause it might just be interesting to know,
Sure.
Maybe nobody's downloading them at all. And that's, yeah.
I think in the past when we've looked at that, we've been surprised that it's hardly being downloaded, but we should look at it more often. It's true. And Bryce, if you could take an action on that today, I would love to see those numbers and communicate them out with the notes.
Yep. This came up in discussion last week, and I'm going to raise the point that I raised then too. Like, I'm guessing that not many people are downloading and using the RC packages because, to your point, Sage, and it's the same point we brought up last week, not many people have an environment where they can easily run the RC packages and test things out. They have most likely one production environment where they're running salt, and they don't necessarily want to break it for the purpose of testing. So I think, like, to our point, like, I think we need an environment where people can give us their state files, their use cases, and have us run, or have them run it in an environment and then tell us, like, hey, this broke. One of the things that we've been talking about doing more and more is in addition to unit and integration tests, is functional tests. And so I think that might be a good basis for those tests, is people's user state files, like, obviously, like, cleaned up with anything and removing any sensitive data. But that would give us a basis for the actual use cases that people are using salt for, and allow us to test those use cases before releases to make sure we're not breaking anything.
Yeah, in the past, I've worked with some teams that had something like a staging environment, a separate staging environment that was exposed that people could log into with a set of passwords, credentials and passwords that were known to change over time and be locked, within a given time frame, but could be used during that sort of bug bounty time to run states and to go and check things out and to even just see how things are working. Maybe you don't have a necessary use case, but you could actually go in and just see changes, see what it looks like, use it, get comfortable with it. And that's valuable as well.
I think some sort of lab environment to do that would be awesome, and making that sort of publicly available. I mean, if only you were owned by a massive virtualization company that had resources to provide that sort of thing, it would be.
Agreed.
So one interesting thing I know that VMware has available, because we went through training last week and they talked about it, but they have a hands-on lab just for VMware products in general. Then, as far as I'm aware, anybody can go sign up for, and then they can go play around with with VMware. So it would be interesting if we could integrate Salt into that in some form or fashion, so people could go in and basically do a hands-on lab with Salt, and then use that type of framework for testing. One of the other ideas / thoughts that I had, part of it's kind of interesting that people don't feel they can test an RC candidate in their environment, but then they'll install another version that just doesn't have the letters RC in the name, and they end out with things on fire, and they're like, oh no, everything's unstable. So there's an interesting I don't know, paradox or incoherence. I'm not really sure what the correct term is there for that. But another thought that I had along those lines was it might be worth investigating or investing some time looking at how to basically unwind a rollback, so that it's like, okay, we can upgrade and test it out, and then we can roll back. So if somebody has an environment where they don't feel they can have a full lab environment, making it at least easy to say install an RC and make sure that it runs, but then also unwind and roll back to the original installation that they had before. That might be an approach for many Salt users.
So to have have a rollback, sort of best practice or state or something like that. Is that what you're saying? Because I think a lot of people do have a rollback process for their environments that would be running this, but if we had something that was specific to Salt.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So following on from that, I think possibly one of the issues that raises the bar for people testing RC releases is there is a stated and sort of almost received wisdom that, well, a stated fact that your masters should always be the same or higher version than your minions. And I entirely understand why that is. However, that raises the bar for anyone doing RC tests, because they look at it and go, well, you know, I've got my master, which is like the most critical part of my environment. I'd be quite happy to test a few minions on this for these candidates, but that's going to be a higher version than the master. So actually, I'd have to upgrade my masters for this to be, you know, a safe or valid test. So actually, that's just too hard, you know, because you know my masters are my most critical, you know, part of this infrastructure. So is it, you know, is it still fundamentally the case that having a master that is a higher version than your same or higher version is an absolute critical requirement? And going forward in the development process, does it need to carry on being like that?
Generally speaking, we've tried really hard to avoid having to enforce that rule. For the most part, that rule is a fallback. Generally speaking, an older master should work with newer minions. And for the most part, we've been able to maintain that for quite a long time. I actually don't think that we've had a compatibility issue for a couple of years. Waz might know better than me, but the goal is that we do not introduce master minion compatibility issues. So again, it's one of situations where the hope is that is kind of a fallback scenario if we have to. But I thought I heard some snickering, so perhaps somebody has more updated information, or there's an issue I'm unaware of.
Sorry, no, that was just a very poor bit of the auto, yeah, the auto translation dig. Yeah, no, so I guess if it is the case that generally master to minion compatibility isn't the problem, or you know, it isn't as much of a problem, it might be worth just making people more aware of that and saying, actually, you know, if you want to test on some minions that are, you know, test an RC release just on your minions, that's still useful, that's still valid, and it probably won't break horribly because we try and ensure that masters are backwards compatible with minions. Because certainly the sort of the feedback I get from people is that everyone is of this opinion that absolutely, you know, your master must be a more recent version than your minions, and I suspect that may put people off testing RC releases just on their minions.
I think that this is an incredibly helpful insight, and one that could really go a long way. So I do think it would be worthwhile to communicate that while that is the case from a policy perspective, that it is a situation that we very rarely need to enforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head there, Barney. I think we need to communicate that out as we do the RC process, and probably make that more visible. I believe we already have it in some documentation, but maybe just make that more visible and more transparent to people as we're putting out the RCs. And I'll take some action to look at that and make sure that's better communicated.
Great.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. And I think it, you know, just defaulting that in as we announce RC, say, hey, you should, you know, while it is good practice to make sure that your master's a higher version, it's not critical. And if you have some minions that you'd be willing to test in your environment, you can do that, especially in the cases where we don't have to break that backwards compatibility. I mean, I can't even remember the last time that I had that problem personally, but then again, I'm not running thousands of nodes in Salt, so.
Yeah. Right, and something I always like to come back to is when we do triage or we're, you know, grooming any kind of tickets, we're always surprised at some of the things that come forward in those those issues, because we just never thought about how people are using salt, because it's so flexible. It can be used in so many ways. It can be used on servers, can be used on desktops. It can be used for other devices, mobile and network devices, in ways that we just haven't thought of. And so we're constantly surprised and delighted at how it's being used, and also can't wrap our brains around some of the problems that may be coming up with those use cases because we hadn't thought of it. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear about how this is affecting you. And if we need to communicate better and showing that backwards compatibility with Master Minion, then so be it. Let us do that. That's something we can totally take on.
Maybe just a note when we do an RC that this will not impact older minions or whatever.
Yeah, I think we have some language around that in the documentation that I'd love to pull out and make more visible. I can think of it. I don't know exactly where it is off the top of my head, but I'll go dig around and make sure that we're doing something a little bit different in that communication, and making that more visible, I think, is what we need. And if we need to update that, that's also possible and likely. Yeah, not a paradox that people assume releases are stable. This is something I've thought about, which is kind of a little bit about what we're talking about, and that's sort of the language around what we're calling things. You know, as we talk about moving away from the branch master, if we go back to develop, or if we called it something like stable or trunk, or there's any number of things to call it, maybe looking at that language as well would also help everyone to understand that releases should be stable. It seems like a very small thing to do that may seem unimportant, but I think the culture around stability needs to be lifted up and thought of in the forefront, if that makes sense. And maybe that even leads to that environment that maybe not long-standing, it would be spun up and torn down often, but could be a development environment or a test environment or something like that, that we could say, this is, if you want to go see what's latest and unstable, known to be unstable, we will have an open lab period from this time to this time, and doing release candidate processes for the next major release during, you know, here's the time frame or some sort of schedule. And that would also be not a separate branch maybe, but a separate environment. That's just off the top of my head, but other ideas as well. There's many ways to do that, but thinking about sort of a development or a test environment that would be unstable kind of goes along with that lab environment that we're talking about. The lab environment that we played with VMware is more about like production. This is stuff we sell to customers, but everybody within, you know, this realm can also go and play with it and see what it's like. But to have that, like, this is unstable, this is known to have issues environment, but you could still go play with it. It's getting more stable. And as we get into that RC process, is available for people to go and test and play with. That's a thought. I mean, that's not uncommon to have. I would actually love to have that.
I would really like to, and we've discussed this a lot in the past, is making sure that we do have nightly builds.
Yes.
And I mean, it's worth noting that in the past, in the early days at least, LinkedIn would run their entire infrastructure on Git head of Salt because they were crazy. They're not as crazy anymore. But that also helped us with stability, because as soon as some of our users would see something, they would immediately report it, right? And we get it taken care of right away. So
Right.
nightly builds would probably be really helpful.
Yeah, and I think we have nightly builds, but we're not putting that anywhere that's exposed to be used. And I think that's the piece that we need. And then also looking to make that into some sort of environment, some sort of lab environment to test. So there's a couple of pieces there that we've thought about as well, and we would like to start making that reality. And I think we will in the next coming release cycle. I have a few things in my back pocket that I'd like to actually get some things to done if I can use some terrible verbiage, but actually get some things more to that complete phase where we tend to be innovators and entrepreneurial and think about things in the really exciting phase, but never get things finished. And I actually have to work at this myself. I have to go and finish things. And I've been thinking about that a lot with some of the things that we've started. One of those things is like the Tiamat packages for salt as a good example, or finishing up the SEP process and really making that tight and visible and usable and succinct and more automatic. And putting some automation around some of those things as well. Nightly builds is another.
So, one of the other things we can consider is, sorry, Barney, interrupted you. No. Just, I'll be quick. Just, we do provide Docker containers, images for both the Salt Master and the Salt Minion. So those are really good ways to test when new releases come out. So maybe we could potentially start doing nightly builds of those as well as the packages. And that would give people an opportunity to test. We have like a few times when people put in issues, they have created like a Docker container running the version that they're running with the particular states, like all packaged up. And that makes it really easy for us to test and figure out what's going on. So if we formalize that process and just make it a little easier for people to do that when they're filing issues, I think that would be a big one too.
That's a great idea.
So just on the sort of nightly builds and using those, certainly in some of my conversations I've had with people within Salt, it seems that Salt Stack as a company don't actually make necessarily heavy use of your own product internally, because you don't have large scale infrastructures. I think you just alluded to, or someone alluded to earlier. Given that you're now part of VMware, are VMware using Salt internally at any sort of scale? And could that be leveraged to say, persuade whichever bits of VMware might be using Salt or could be persuaded to use Salt to then do that in a, as Microsoft used to say, sort of dog fooding way to actually use your nightly builds to do something at scale?
Yeah, so at VMware, I think that they call it champagning.
Okay.
It's not my term. But yes, there are infrastructures inside of VMware that do make extensive use of Salt. That, of course, was one of those driving factors for the acquisition, is that there's a significant amount of internal usage. We are working with many of those teams to make sure that they are assisting us in ongoing testing. At this point, I'm hesitant to make any public promises around that, just because we're still pretty early in that process, right? And we've got a lot of additional teams inside of VMware that are now, of course, migrating their infrastructure management to also use Salt. With that said, as we are still integrating heavily with quite a few products inside of VMware, and those product lines are also going to be testing against stable and development versions moving forward. That ecosystem, I hope, is going to be really, really beneficial and helpful. But again, I'm hesitant to make structured promises at this point. I've got a really aggressive policy about I don't make promises if I don't know for sure I can deliver them.
Sure.
Absolutely. I think that we're seeing that happen though already, where I don't think we have enough training classes available for people to take at the moment, since we've been acquired. And that's sort of what's now considered internal. We're trying to make those available to people, and then of course this goes along with it. And so as we look at that, I think it becomes imperative that we tie that up and make sure that's available in some way. But yeah, we don't know what that is.
Yeah, we are training swaths and swaths of VMware employees right now. It's consumed a lot of our training resources. Yeah, Rob Robertson has been just teaching his mind out. Yes.
I've even had people ask me questions that I don't know that I have the answer to. I have been putting them back to Rob and others. It's been amazing and frankly daunting. and crazy cool. Something that I wanted to point out that is really a win for this team, and that is this meeting. When I started with this team a little more than a year ago, it was interesting that we had a problem with communication, and I think that this meeting has really grown to be an avenue of communication in ways we couldn't have foreseen. But I do think that it's a real win to say that we're doing better and that it's exposed how we can just continue to make communication better. We're always learning.
So with all of what we've said, should we start doing probably not nightly builds, but weekly builds?
Yeah, we'll talk about it in the Friday meeting, exactly some of those details, Bryce.
Okay.
With that, we're kind of getting towards the end of the hour. Does anybody have anything else? I will just open it up to general Q&A or discussion topics, if anybody has any. And if not, we can always end early.
So I have a great and horrible, well, you'll see. So apparently the best term for dad jokes is popcorn.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
The laugh is even better. And it's even more awkward in a Zoom call because I only hear you laughing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was priceless.
Only because no one would pay for that joke.
Oh, you paid.
In more ways than one.
So in the chat, yeah, a little bit of a sensitive topic that we did lose a teammate in the transition and in the merger. And we, yeah, it's sensitive. We're definitely missed Dimitri, and that was not anybody's plan, I don't believe. But I don't think that there's anything to be concerned about on that front. I think that was more of he was a contractor, and that didn't work out in the merger. And we miss him really and wish that we could have figured that out in a different way. And I just don't think that it was possible in this juncture, but would love to have him back and as a community member and hope that he will be still continue to contribute. And moving forward, we only see that the team could grow at this point and grow the community. So that's where we are with that. I don't know that I have more that I know I can say. Tom, if you have anything.
Yeah, to be honest, there's only so much that it would be, I think, appropriate for me to disclose. In a nutshell, we could not come to an agreement with, Dimitri was working with an offshore contractor. And unfortunately, we could not come to an agreement with that contractor moving forward, which was unfortunate because Dimitri is fantastic. With that said, yes, we are planning on continuing to expand this team moving forward. A lot of where we're at right now is still really deep in the integration. And so we're going to have more salt stack job postings coming up, probably early next year. But for right now, it's so much of it is just the overall transition that we don't want to burden the team with additional onboarding. But again, with that said, yes, we are certainly looking to grow. This is not a situation where what we're looking at is long-term shrinkage inside of VMware. VMware is incredibly dedicated to pushing forward the open source project, and the people who I'm working with inside of VMware, they get it. They understand the reasons why. They understand why making Salt as healthy of an open source project as possible is also lucrative to VMware in the long term. And so that's not something that I would be overly concerned with, just apart from the fact that give us a few more months of integration and making sure that we hit all of our initial milestones inside of VMware so that it is easy for us to grow quickly in the long run.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Carl, for asking that question. I hope that people feel like they can be transparent and ask questions as much as possible. We will answer as best we can and as openly as we can. Something that I have really learned to embrace about working in open source is being open. And that is actually just who I am as a person. So I have fully embraced that and feel that that is the best way to live and grow. Well, we are at about 3 minutes to the hour. Does anybody have anything else? Snail jokes?
I think the dad joke covered them all.
Popcorn covered it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this week. This has been fantastic. Thank you for the feedback and thank you for your questions. Commentary, of course. We look forward to hearing from you. And as always, thank you for your contributions. Happy Thursday.
Thanks. Bye.